Thank you very much, Dwayne, and thank you guys all for coming. So, what we're going to do tonight is I am going to talk for about an hour, and that will involve 2 readings. In between the readings, we'll do a Q&A, so you need to be thinking about what you're going to ask me, because otherwise it's going to get really awkward. I was driving myself on tour 5 years ago. I think it was 5 years ago. I think it was the third Mistborn Novels tour. I used to drive everywhere on tour. Every one of my signings up until that point, I'd driven myself to. I didn't fly on book tour. This started because I, as a brand new author, wanted to go on tour, and I talked to my publicist, and my publicist said, okay, kind of expensive, you're brand new, how about we send you to one place? And I thought, one place? How much can that cost? And she talked about the money. I'm like, whoa, hey, give me that budget. I'll hit 12 cities. And I convinced the publicist to give me, it was a $1,000 budget. And I grabbed Dave Farland / David Wolverton, and I said, let's go on tour together. We'll sleep in the Motel 6. We'll take my car. We'll share the gas money, and we'll hit all these cities, and we can do it really cheaply. And so together we went on tour. Did anyone see us when we were on tour then? Yeah, it's way back when. We did it with Lee Modisett for part of the tour as well. I don't know if you guys remember when that came, but that was old school. So I got very used to driving myself on tour. I liked it. I got to kind of pick where I would go. I'd always have a car in place. Well, eventually my book started to take off. And this whole me driving myself on tour, the publishers are like, you know, you're kind of an important enough author, we should be flying you places. Like, no, I want to drive. I want to get myself where I need to go. And so they wanted me to go to the East Coast for the first time. And I thought, great, I will rent a car, I will drive myself up the coast, I will sign at all the cities along the way, just like I've done on the West Coast, it'll be great. This is the last time they ever let me drive myself anywhere on tour. Because it wasn't a disaster, but I did manage to get myself very lost on a very large number of occasions. It turns out that driving in DC is a little bit harder than driving even in Seattle, which I thought was pretty hard. And it can be kind of crazy over there. Beyond that, I had managed to do something really weird. See, I left my computer in the airport. Yeah, it was one of these things where you go through the airport and, you know, they have the little bins and stuff, and I put all my stuff in and went through, and my backpack had a knife in it. It was a steak knife. I'd been on a picnic. But, you know, the klaxons go off, and, like, they pull out guns. Well, they really, you know what I mean? You feel like it. You feel like you're being surrounded by all these people, and they're like, is this yours, sir? It's like they're holding up a kilo of cocaine or something, and not just, like, a steak knife. And you're like, don't kill me. I'm famous. I was quite put out of sorts. They threw the knife away, they ran through everything again, I was okay, they said, go on, you know, don't be a terrorist anymore. And I stacked up those bins, and my laptop was in the bottom bin. And so I grabbed everything out, and I walked off, because it was a very thin laptop, very nice, you know, newfangled, everything has to be thin. So I didn't even know this was in there, so I go off without it. Now, this was not as big a deal as you might think, because I realized it as soon as I got to Charleston, where I was starting on my tour, and I called my brother-in-law, had him pick up the computer, they had it, everything was fine. They're like, yeah, you're the 13th bozo this day to leave the laptop, it happens all the time. But I didn't realize until leaving to drive to my next place that my phone charger was a USB charger that plugged into my laptop and required the software on my laptop to charge. And so I get going, I open up the GPS, and my phone dies. Now, how long did we survive without these phones? Right? Like, I think I was able to live a good, 20-something years without a data phone. I thought, oh, I can do this. Yeah. No GPS. I didn't know anyone's phone numbers anymore. Does anyone memorize phone numbers still? Yeah, some of you, you're smart. I don't. I could get my wife's phone number after trying 5 times. I'm like, oh, it's a 3 or it's a 1, or I finally was able to call her, but my agent. I don't have his phone number. I don't have that memorized. And so suddenly I'm driving, trying to find bookstores, and I realize nobody has phone books anymore. And I can't look up the bookstore's phone number and call them. And so I'm supposed to be going, this is on one of these days, I'm supposed to be going to Pittsburgh, and I'm like in Montana somewhere. And there's like some guy playing the banjo with like buck teeth next to on the road, and it's just weird, and I'm lost, and I'm scared, and I'm going to be late to my signing, and I'm really stressed out, and somebody cut me off in traffic. And I'm an even-keel guy, right? I don't have a temper. I'm a pretty easy to get along with guy, but in that moment, when that car, and I'm stressed and I'm late, I was just like, you are lucky I don't have superpowers. I will blow your car up right now. I imagine it happening, right? Car exploding, Michael Bay directs it. It's like 5 explosions as it flips end over end. Great special effects. It was very satisfying to imagine that car exploding. And then I was horrified. Because I had spent my youth imagining what it would be like to have these powers, right? I mean, you guys probably grew up reading some of these books. You wondered what would it be like, if I had a dragon, or what would it be like if I could channel or have the will of the word, whatever these powers are. What would that be like? What would I do? And in that moment, I had this vision that what I would do would be destroy cars that cut me off in traffic. Because I'm pretty sure I actually would have done it right then. And that was terrifying to me. And so anytime I have a strong and powerful emotional reaction, my immediate response is, ooh, let's put this in a book. That's the difference between writers. Some people are horrified by their actions and think, what can I do to become a better person? I get horrified and say, what can I do to make a story out of this? To horrify other people. So I spent the next few hours driving to this book signing, imagining a story, imagining what would happen if people started gaining these powers in real life. And what if there was no check upon their powers? What if there weren't heroes to stop them? What if they could just do whatever they wanted? And this was fascinating to me. This spun into the story of Steelheart, the idea of a world where the United States has to pass a law that says, look everyone, we can't stop these things. We can't throw them in prison. They can break out of prisons. We can't do anything about them. We are going to declare that they are forces of nature. And just like you avoid a hurricane, when a hurricane comes blowing through town, you just have to be lucky enough to avoid them and take out supervillain insurance. Or whatever it is you want to do. But yes, it basically causes an apocalypse. And I imagine this young man who I eventually named David, whose father was killed by the Emperor of Chicago, and who wanted revenge. And it was a fun story to imagine. The story of regular people, researching the weaknesses of supervillains and bringing them down was a fascinating story to me. I was so excited to write this story. I watch for things that excite me like this. As a writer, I'm approaching 30-something books written, of which about half of those have been published. After writing that many books, you watch for those things that make you really excited. That make you remember why it is you love being a writer. And you're always watching for those ideas. And you're hoping, and I hope that each one of my book combines several of those ideas that make me excited, that make the entire process vibrant for me still. So I got to my signing finally. My agent was there. I went to him and I said, I've got an idea. And he's like, oh no. Because he'd gotten used to the fact that I accidentally write books. This doesn't happen to most writers, I've found, but he would occasionally be expecting a book from me, and I would call him up and say, hey, I accidentally wrote a different book. Yeah, I'm still going to write that one under contract, but here's another one. Just out of nowhere. This happened with Alcatraz, it happened with the Arithmetist. I will just occasionally do this, and I've come to learn that my process is such that once I finish a project, I naturally search for something very different from that project to write in order to give myself a break from what I've just finished doing. It has nothing to do with against the book I've just finished. In fact, I love the big epic fantasies. They're, my first love. It's what I want to be known for. It's what I think one of the things I really think I can contribute to the science fiction fantasy genre is these stories with the things I like to do. But in between those, I always find myself searching for a different story with a very different voice to do in order to refresh myself. And so, learning my process and him knowing me is like, oh no, there's another book incoming. and he pointed out to me, Brandon, didn't you just take on a very small project called The Wheel of Time? And I said, yes, I did. He's like, so when are you going to write this book? And I said, I don't know. I'm going to find a time, though, because I need to write this story. And over the next 5 years, I actually did write this story. I found moments in between doing drafts of various books when I'm like, I need to do something different for a while, and I would stop and I would write a few chapters of Steelheart. And it became this promise to myself that once The Wheel of Time was done, I could then release this book, which now you guys all can have and read. And that is the story of how it came to be. I'm extremely excited to finally be able to talk about it with you. I did a reading of it, like a prologue, which I'd written very early, like Dragon Con in like 2009. And everyone's like, oh, let us read this book. I'm like, I can't. It's not even done yet. And it finally is. I'm actually not going to read from this book, however. This is because when you make the effort to come to one of my signings, and I know it can be kind of hard, finding parking, getting into this place, things like this, coming to see me, I want to always be reading to you from something that you can't get anywhere else, to make this a special experience. And so, while it might be a better idea, my agent always says, shouldn't you read from a book they can go buy? Instead of doing that, I'm going to read to you from Words of Radiance, which is the sequel to The Way of Kings. Now, the interesting thing about reading from this book is I have to be very careful. I don't want to spoil the first book for those who haven't read it yet, which can be difficult reading from a sequel without spoiling the first book. Fortunately, I have a scene I can read in here, which takes place on the same day as the prologue of the first book. When I pitched this book to myself, this series, one of the things I wanted to do was have one of these different viewpoint sequences where you see the same day from a lot of different eyes. And for this, it was going to be the prologue. The prologue of each of the first 5 books would be a different perspective on the very same night. And this is the night that the assassin in white came to the palace of Kholinar. And I am going to read what Yasna, the king's daughter, was doing on that day. The sound of drums thrummed down through the ceiling. Rock and wood blocked the specifics. It sounded like a distant rainfall. The vivacious thrumming made the very stones of the Kholinar palace vibrate. Yasna Koling glanced up toward the music, pleased to have extricated herself from the festivities so quickly. Let her uncle and the others drink themselves to oblivion. The treaty with the Parshendi had been signed, and that was all she cared about. Yasna turned back to the woman seated across the small table from her. Then she set a small envelope sealed with weevil wax before herself. Yasna set 2 fingers on it, considering. Then she slid it across the table. The woman, Liz, picked it up and made it vanish into the bust of her low-cut maid's dress. An odd night, Brightness, the woman said, to be engaging in treason. I'm hiring you to watch only. Pardon, Brightness, but one does not commonly hire an assassin to watch only. Yasna drummed her fingers on the table, then realized she was doing it to the beat of the celebration above. A pity that the Alepi Lightites frowned upon drums. The Parshendi music was exotic with startling complexity. She would have liked to have heard more. Startling complexity, Yasna thought. Like the drummers themselves, really. I will tell you, Yasna replied, if your other services are needed, you move only if I say. No mistakes, no accidents, Liz. For now, you assume the role of a lady's maid to my brother's wife. That is all. You're the one paying, Liz said. They called her the Weeper. Although she hadn't coined the cognomen, it served her purpose well, since she had secrets to hide. The first was her gender. No one knew that the Weeper was actually a woman. The second secret had to do with the eyes of the people that she killed. It was said the Weeper gouged them out to proclaim indifference to whether her victims were light-eyed or dark. The truth was she didn't want anyone to know that the way she killed left corpses with burned-out eye sockets. I will arrange for one of my sister-in-law's maids to be released, Yasna said. You will apply for the position using faked credentials I assume you are capable of producing. You will be hired. It's done then, Liz said, standing and nodding to Yasna. What happened to that slave you were talking about? Yasna asked. I thought you were going to show him off for me. I sold him to a slaver weeks ago, Liz said, grimacing. Really? I thought you said he was the best servant you'd ever had. Too good a servant, Liz said. Let's leave it at that. Stormy and creepy that one was. Liz shivered visibly, then walked to the door. She hesitated before leaving. Do you know why I like you, Brightness? I suspect it has something to do with my pockets and their proverbial depth. Liz smiled. There's that, ain't gonna deny it, but you're also different from other Luddites. When others hire me, they turn their noses up at the entire process. They're all too eager to use my services, but they sneer and wring their hands as if they hate being forced to do something so utterly distasteful. Assassination is distasteful, Liz. So is cleaning out chamber pots. I can respect the one employed for such jobs without admiring the job itself. Liz grinned. Remember our first agreement, Yasna said. Always there in the back of my mind, Brightness. Liz slipped out of the hallway, taking her serving man who had been waiting there, then withdrawing into the night. Yasna sat back, lacing her fingers in front of her. Their first agreement was that if anyone should come to Liz and offer a contract on any member of Yasna's family, Liz would let Yasna match the offer in exchange for the name of the one who had made it. Liz would do it, probably. So would the dozen other assassins Yasna dealt with. A repeat customer was always more valuable than a one-off contract, and it was in the best interest of a woman like Liz to have a friend in the government. Yasna's family was safe from the likes of these, unless she herself employed the assassins, of course. Yasna let out a deep sigh, then rose, trying to shrug off the weight she felt bearing her down. Her shadow didn't rise quite quickly enough. Yasna spun on it and narrowed her eyes. She could have sworn. And the other day, when she cast a shadow the wrong way, like recorded in Wavenley's dialogues as a superstitious sign that someone had been cursed. Long days of fatigue or something else. Yasna left the small chamber in the bowels of the palace and slipped out into the hallway. She turned her steps upward. Perhaps one of the Parshendi would be sober enough to speak with her, and she could pry further about that song's translation. Above, the drums cut off, abrupt, like the strings suddenly cut on an instrument. Was the party ending so early? I will stop there. So there you go. That scene is what's happening with Yasna, and I will say nothing further because we will stray into spoilers soon after. Let me go ahead and ask you guys what you are interested in hearing from me, and I will start answering the questions. Yes?
First off, a quick comment. You were talking about touring back east on that subject.
Yes.
I have a friend in Detroit
Mm-hmm.
who laments the fact that you never seem to show up there.
I was in Detroit at Penguicon 2 years ago, so I have at least been there on tour one time.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I did. I worked it into the... There, don't worry, I will repeat the questions.
My question, on your website where it says current projects, it's tracking multiple drafts of Words of Radiance. What is that process like? When you've got
What is the drafting process of... Yeah.
First draft, what is the process of producing the second and third line?
What is the process of producing the second and third drafts or things like this? So when I write a book, I tend to write first drafts. I write beginning to end without doing a lot of revision. I don't do a lot of self-revision as I go. I figure I need something to work with first, and then I can edit that and make it good. I need to have something bad that I can make good. I need to get it down. And so having a fantastic first chapter but not spending any time writing the rest of the book doesn't work for me. So for some people, they draft that first chapter, it looks great, then draft the second chapter, then the third draft. That's not how it goes for me. This means that when my books get done, they're pretty rough, particularly in the language division. The language, the prose is really rough. So usually draft number 2 is a draft that I go through and I fix the major problems, because as I'll be writing along, I'll think, man, I really need another character in this book doing something like this. And I'll go back to my outline and I'll build out this character, and then I'll just start writing them in from there on. And they won't be in the first half of the book. It's just like they walk on and everyone's like, oh, hey, Joe, how you doing? You know, it's like it's been there all along. And so I have to fix this. And a lot of times I will, as I'm writing along, realize something in my outline needs to change. I will need a different type of climax or things like this, and I'll write it out as I feel it needs to be, and then I'll go back in and add the foreshadowing. So draft number 2 is fixing all of that. Draft number 3 is my first polishing draft, where I make the writing good enough for people to actually read. In Words of Radiance, I actually did those two drafts at the same time. I would go through the chapter, and then I would go through and do another draft very quickly, because I was sending it off in chunks to my editor. It was a very different process, because the time on this, we really want to get it out soon. So I was trying to get chunks to my editor that he could work on while I was finishing up writing the end of the book, which is not something I advise, but it's how we had to do it so that we can maximize both of our times working on it. So at that point, 3.0, normally it's 4.0, so we're one draft ahead. So 4.0 will be the editorial draft. When the editor gets back to me all the stuff that I need to do, I will then go through and input everything make the big changes they want. Then I'll read through the book again to polish. And this time I ended up having to do those two drafts together again. And then after that, 5 through 7, usually 7 is about as far as I go, are more, back and forth with the editor, or let my writing group read it and put in their comments and things like this. And so 7.0 is what normally gets published. On Wheel of Time, it was 12 or 13, because we needed extra drafting for continuity. And extra drafting for various, just working with his assistants to make sure I'm getting things right. So those books, I think Gathering Storm was 13.0, and I think A Memory of Light, we managed to get better. I think it was 11.0 that got published. So that's where we are. I will be doing a 4.0 on Words of Radiance very soon here. We will probably get to 5.0 on this one, because we combined several of the drafts. So there's 2 more drafts left to do. But the most difficult one is usually the 4.0, the one where the editorial comments have to be put in, and that one's done for this book. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. It just needs 2 more kind of polishes before it'll be ready.
So when you get editorial comments, do you do everything, or do you push back on something?
Do I do everything, or do I push back on editorial suggestions? I push back. One thing to keep in mind is the book is mine. The book is not the editor's. And I have most authors I know, when they work with an editor, it is a give and take. You can call the editor and say, I don't think you're right here. And at the end of the day, it's my book, not the editor's book, and I get to choose. Now, if there's a really big conflict between me and the editor, they can choose not to publish the book. They have that out. Or I can choose to not have them publish the book. So you do have to balance things. But the biggest fight my editor and I have ever had about anything was whether I could use the word podium when he wanted the word to be lectern. Moshe's a bit of a philologist, and he thinks that the word podium is this adulterous word that has been transformed away from, you have to be standing on it. This can't be a podium. But out in the West, you go up to the podium and you talk, and this can be a podium, but this is a lectern to my editor. And by golly, I was going to use the right word in any book that he released, because he was not going to stand for this corruption of the English language. So that's the biggest argument we've ever had. What's that he won? It's a word. At the end of the day, I'm like, it's a word, right? It was for Mistborn 3. Yeah. So, in the back.
Do you have an approximate release date for Words of Radiance?
Oh, do I have an approximate release date for Words of Radiance? Yes, March 4th. And it's not approximate. We're pretty locked into this one, because we've already taken out the marketing and stuff like that. So I need to get it done. So I'll get back before, and I will push through those next 2 drafts pretty quickly. The book is in great shape, so I'm not too worried about it. It's just the polishing that needs to be done at this point. We just had beta read comments come in, and so when I get back from draft, I will do the next draft polishing and adding in the beta reader comments. Other things that are being published. Let's go down the list, because I will prevent a few people's questions. So, the next book after that will probably be the sequel to Steelheart. The reason I'm doing the sequel to Steelheart first is I wrote and finished Steelheart more recently than The Arithmetist. I love The Arithmetist, but I wrote the book in 2007. And so I want to do Steelheart while the iron is hot, so to speak, and get the sequel out. I will then go to work on The Arithmetist sequel. Another thing in the pipeline for very soon is a sequel to Alloy Law. So those are the books you can expect in the near future. I will finish the Alcatraz books at some point next year. I just finally got them redistributed. I bought them back from the publisher. We kind of have this big thing with them. So I will write the last one of those. Those are very nice breather books I take between projects. Other things, don't expect sequels too soon. I kind of got into this position because I was so excited about Steelheart, and because it had been 5 years since I've been able to release anything, that we kind of unstopped the river, so to speak, and outflowed Arithmetist, Steelheart, and The Way of Kings over the last few years. I feel I have enough things going that starting anything new or doing sequels to books that don't demand them is probably a bad idea right now. I need to be wrapping some things up. And so my focus will be on those series right now. I would probably alternate Stormlight Archive and Outlive Law era Mistborn books just to give myself some variety. On the adult side and the children's side, I'll probably alternate Steelheart and Arithmetist. Arithmetist is 2 books. And Steelheart is 3. And so we will get these done. Anything else, any other sequels you're wondering about probably aren't coming anytime soon, but I will get around to them eventually. All right, question right here.
To the second grade teacher, what advice would you give my second graders who want to become authors?
Advice to second graders who want to become writers. Ooh, second grader. I would say that the most important thing for a writer to do until perhaps their college age is to practice. It's the same advice I would give to someone whose second grader wants to learn the piano. Set aside some time every day, or probably not every day, depends on the kid, but every week they need a block of time and they should write if they really want to. Practice is the best thing that you can do. The way you train yourself to be a writer is by writing. Once they get older, you can worry about publishing. You can worry even at that point about getting feedback and things like that. But when you're young, I would practice writing. I would also practice revising. But I don't know if I tell second graders that. When I talk to middle schoolers, the thing I like to put up on my screen, because middle schoolers hate this. They hate doing, they finish a book, they don't want to do any drafts. We all know this. We were that age once, or we'll be that age soon. I put up on the screen, I have Elantris. Elantris, the version that got published was like 9.0 or something like that. And Microsoft Word has this compare documents function. And I once took 1.0 and 9.0 and said, do a comparison. And what it did is it struck out anything that I deleted, and it added in red anything I changed. So all the red was the changes. And then I was able to shrink the document down so like 100 pages showed on the screen. And the white, because I did it with the inverted screen, so it was blue with white and red, so the colors were more stark, so they could see white had stayed the same, red had changed, and over half the book was red. And I put this up on there, I'm like, this is the amount of revision that it takes most writers to publish. Not everyone is the same, but that's what it takes. And so teaching them, yes, you're going to have to revise, would be useful, but at that age, I would just say practice. Learning to write is like learning to play baseball. The more time you do it, the better you'll get. All right, question. There was one over here. Yes?
All I wanted to say was congratulations on the Hugo.
Oh, thank you very much. I say congratulations on the Hugo. Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Yes, is Dwayne in here still? Dwayne. Hey, do you have paperbacks of Emperor's Soul? Do you have paperbacks of the Emperor's Soul? Yes, you do? Okay, cool. So if you weren't aware, The Emperor's Soul is my novella. It won the Hugo Award, which is kind of like the Academy Award for science fiction. And they have copies out there. Thank you very much for letting me say into this. I have a short promotional blurb on it. The thing I'm doing with Emperor's Soul is I kept the ebook rights. I can't do this for any of my other books, okay? So don't ask me to do this for the Wheel of Time. I kept the ebook rights specifically so I could try something, which was letting someone like Dwayne sell the hard copy, which is a trade paperback right now, and then giving the ebook to anyone who bought it from him for free, which allows you to collect the book to support your booksellers, but also read on your e-reader. I know I would love to have 2 copies of everything, and so if you buy the hard copy from Dwayne and send me a picture of yourself holding it, I will respond with a free DRM-free ebook that you can read on any of your e-readers. Okay? There's just something I'm doing as an experiment. I'm going to try and convince the publisher to let me do it with all of my books. I think it's a way that if I could possibly get it to work for Words of Radiance, I will, where I can come and everyone can buy the nice, beautiful hardcover from Dwayne and then get a free ebook from me and also be able to have their e-readers. So this is something I'm trying. I will promote that. Yes, good idea. I will mention that later. They just got a whole promotional blurb, so I don't want to force feed them too much. All right, thanks for reminding me. Okay, question.
Have you read any of your books to your kids, or do you intend to?
Have I read any of my books to my kids, or do I intend to? Well, my oldest is 5 right now, and I tried Bunnicula with him, and he didn't get it. Like the fact that it was the dog's viewpoint, was really kind of confusing to him. So we're kind of in the don't let the patient drive the bus, which is a fantastic book kind of thing right now. And I'm next trying, is it Jeff Smith, Bone? I've been reading Bone to him, for anyone who knows. I think his name is Jeff Smith. It's a great story. It's a graphic novel. And so that's what I'm trying next. But he's really into the Captain America picture books and things like that. So eventually, yes, I would like to read some to my kids, but I think we're going to have to wait until he's a little bit older before I do that. I've got 3 little boys, by the way, a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and 7 months. And the 7-month-old is so cute, he refuses to crawl, he will only flop. Has anyone had a kid do this? He like puts his arms up and kicks, he goes, flop. It's like someone doing the worm, right? And he can just scoot all the way across the room, he's so fast, but it's flop, 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 flop. Before I left, I stuck a squeaky toy in his shirt, and then my wife walked in, and he went, squeak, 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 over to her. She just about died. It was crazy. All right, there was a question over here somewhere, I thought. Maybe not. Maybe I answered it. All right. Have I considered writing a book specifically for 5 or 6-year-olds? I haven't really. I feel like it's a completely different skill. And there are people who are very good at it. And I am not, it's not something I practice. I love science fiction and fantasy. I started writing middle grade and teen because I love those books. I read them quite a bit. And I feel like I should write what I read a lot of. And, it's like when I read one of these books for my kids, I'm kind of forced to. Like, eventually you will get Tolkien. But for right now, we will read Duck on a Bike. Duck on a Bike's pretty good, by the way. But yes, so I can only tell if it's a really good book by how my kids react to it, though. Like Duck on a Bike, they love that book. But other ones, they're like, whatever. All right, question right back here.
I think you said there's going to be 5 Stormlight archives. Is that true?
Yes, the question is 5 Stormlight Archive. I pitched it to to Tom Doherty as 2 sequences of 5. The first 5-book sequence will end its own arc, and then there will be another 5, because 10 is such a mythologically important number, and each of the books I wanted to be dedicated to one of the orders of Knights Radiant, kind of thematically. And so, yes, there will eventually be 10, but the 5-book arc will end a complete story on its own. So, there you are. Yes, right here.
How old were you when you started writing? What inspired you?
How old was I when I started writing? I was 15 or 16. I can't remember exactly. I was old for, many people started writing their first books when they were like 2 years old, right? Not me, I hated books. I was not a reader until I had a teacher in middle school named Ms. Reader. It's true. She forced me to read one of the books she had there in her room with her because I had been trying to read well below my level and was dodging her attempts to get me to do something better. And so she made me read a book that she had read recently so we could talk about it. And the book I ended up picking off of her rack was Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hamlin. And I loved that book. She sent me to the library to find something like it, and the next thing in the card catalog was Dragonflight by Andy McCaffrey. And so I fell in love with the genre. I was, a goner from that point on. Dragonflight did me in, and I became an epic fantasy super fan at that point and read everything I could get my hands on. And tried about a year later, I think, or so, maybe it was 2 years later, tried starting my own book. It was awful. I actually posted some pages from it on my website and on tour.com. I have them. I took a photocopy of them or whatever it is, and I posted them online. So you can go read what it is. It's really bad. It's like a bad Tad Williams fanfic. Kind of like half Tad Williams, half Dragonlance. Yeah, so my second book, which I never finished the first one, my second book, it's really funny. If you guys are aspiring writers, I have a podcast called Writing Excuses, which also won the Hugo Awards. That's why there were 2. That you can listen to. You just go through in your browser, push play. You don't have to actually, download it for the podcast. But anyway, we have an episode where we critique my second book, which was my first finished one. We read the first few paragraphs on air and talked about it, and it's hilarious because it starts off with the wind scene from Wheel of Time book. Even though I didn't realize I was doing it, I copied the Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time starts with an omniscient viewpoint of the wind blowing through. Each book does that, and I did that in my book, and I hadn't even remembered it. So you can go listen to this, and we talk about critiquing it and things like that. It's a lot of fun. So that one was dreadful too. All right, over here in the red.
You mentioned on your website that there was talks for a Steelheart movie.
Steelheart movie, yes. I have sold film rights on basically everything. I've sold film rights on Emperor's Soul, Legion, Steelheart, Mistborn, Alcatraz. The Alcatraz one lapsed though. So, is any of this going to get made? I have no idea. I don't understand Hollywood in the same way that I understand New York. I've spent all of my time learning the business of publishing, and I don't have the expertise in Hollywood that I do in New York. I have no idea if they're actually ever going to make any of these films, or if they're just going to pay me every year to not make them. I'm kind of okay getting paid every year. Alcatraz was optioned for 5 years, and they paid me every year to not make that film, which was kind of nice. But I would actually rather have a film. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I'm hopeful, but not expectant. And the back right over there. Which character do I identify with the most? You know, it's very hard to say because each character I write is a piece of me. And choosing a favorite character or a favorite book would be like trying to choose a favorite child. While I'm writing that person, I have to identify with them in some way. So it's very different. I often will go back to Dalinar when people ask things about this, just to give an answer, because Dalinar was in that very first book that I wrote when I was 15 or 16. That was so dreadful. He and Hoyd are the two characters that have lasted until now. So it's kind of cool to still be writing books about them. But the truth is that I really can't pick a favorite. All right, right over here.
If you had to pick, which one of your books would you want them to make a movie out of?
If I had to pick which book would I have them make a film out of, I would probably pick Mistborn, unless I could pick The Wheel of Time, which I would pick in head. But I'm not sure if I really count for that. I would rather The Wheel of Time be a television show, honestly. I think it'd make a great television show. But if I were going to make a feature film, and I could pick any of one of my novels, I would pick the first Mistborn book, which I think would translate really well. And I'm actually kind of annoyed that the Avengers came out and was so popular, because now Joss Whedon is actually popular. Before, his films had all flopped. I'm like, yes, I can totally get Joss Whedon because his films all flopped. But now there's like no chance of getting Joss Whedon because he's too. People have actually realized, wow, he makes great movies. So, but yeah, that would have been my dream for many years. So, like every fanboy, right? All right, other questions? Yes, Brian. Yes.
They're very fascinating.
How accurate are Tor.com's scientific examinations of the science of the Stormlight Archive? They get a lot of things right, but not everything. How about that? Okay, let's do right over here.
What's the most fun part of writing to you?
What's the most fun part of writing? That moment where you have the completed novel, all done as it was in your head, before you do revisions, and you get to say, I did it. There it is. It came out. Then revisions suck. But for a moment, you are done. So the last word. There's a question over here. Yes?
What recent book have you read that you went, oh, I really wish I had written that one, and why?
What recent book have I read that I said, oh, I wish I'd written that one, and why? I'm rereading The Black Prison by Brett Weeks. Because I want to be ready for the third one when it's coming out. And I really like that book. I think his magic is innovative, and his character interactions are fun. And I keep thinking, man, he did this so well. So I would say that. Other recent books I've read that I really liked, there is a woman named Jancy. Did she go by Jancy Patterson? I think she did, on her first book, which was a teen contemporary. I read her second book, which is about it's called 1,000 Faces, about a shapeshifter a teenage girl shapeshifter who runs industrial espionage. Like she'll sneak into Apple and like steal their secrets by imitating someone else. And it was awesome. So hopefully that one will get published and he'll be able to read it. But I read a draft of it, and it was really cool. And I finished Brian McClellan's Promise of Blood. That was a really good book too. So those are the ones I finished. I started like 3 others, but I won't mention those because I didn't finish them. So all right, you had a question back here. Yes.
I was pretty much going to ask the same thing.
Okay.
Book recommendations.
Book recommendations. Well, those are all good. Some of my standbys are Kaigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge, and of course Andy McCaffrey's Dragon Riders. If you haven't read them, they're fantastic. And I really like Robin Hobb's work. I've loved every book of hers I've read. So yeah, there you go. There's a bunch. All right, let's do 2 more questions, and then I'll do the other reading. So right here.
When you have to step away from a project for a while, like for instance, how do you get back into it?
When I step away from a project for a while, how do I get back into it? It's a good question. It usually involves me rereading the book and writing the annotations for that book, which you can sometimes find on my website. The annotation writing process gets me back into a mind of thinking critically about the series and why I did what I did for the book, and allows me then to approach writing the sequel. So yeah. All right, last question. How was the fantasy calendar shoot? So there's a woman who's doing a charity calendar where she's taking pictures of fantasy authors in various interesting situations. It was really, really uncomfortable to kneel the way that she placed me in the water, because I was on the salt flats in Utah, and this puddle of water pouring glow stick liquid that she'd broken up like 100 glow sticks and taken the liquid out, pouring it into a pool in front of me. It was very cool, but it was incredibly uncomfortable. So there we are. Okay, I am going to do another reading. But before we do this, because everyone wants to clap and be done after the reading, I'll do my announcements. The first one is, as Dwayne wanted me to mention, we do have copies of Unfettered here, which is Sean Speakman's anthology, a local guy, which has all sorts of wonderful stories, many of them in worlds that people are known for writing. And my story in there is actually a deleted sequence from A Memory of Light, and will probably be the last piece of Wheel of Time fiction that is ever written. We cut it out of the book for various reasons. I talk about it in the foreword, and so it's really cool. The anthology was dedicated entirely to paying for Sean's medical bills, which I believe we have completely paid off now. So that is awesome. So there won't be actually any more printings of the book, right? Is this it?
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay.
Rothfuss is pushing me for a second printing.
A second printing. So perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. But we have copies out there. And the ones that Wayne has are signed by Jack McCary as well. Is that right? And Peter Brett, I think. Yeah, Peter Aurelian. It's Aurelian? Yeah. So Aurelian, me, Sean, and Jack McCary have signed these copies, and you can go collect all the other signatures. They have lots of other copies of my backlist out there, like The Emperor's Soul, probably some of the Wheel of Time books, all of my things. So we do appreciate you supporting the bookstore. I know it can be a little bit of a pain to go through the whole ticketing process and things like that, but I do appreciate you coming. I mean, we have to rent out a place because there's just so blasted many of you. So I hope that it's okay to you guys that we do this whole ticketing thing. And I do appreciate Dwayne and who's your new events person? Eileen, right? Dwayne and Eileen and all the people at University Bookstore. They had me in when I was nobody, and I still kind of am, but I'm a much better selling nobody. And they do a good service for the science fiction fans community. So I would like to give them a round of applause. Please do support your local bookstores so that we can have more book signings like this. If there are people here with young children, I would invite them to come to the front of the line so we can get the babies home to sleep. The same goes for anyone who is disabled or who is would otherwise have trouble standing for a long time. I once had a woman who was 92 wait in my line for 2 hours, and I would rather avoid that. So feel free to come up to the front. Let's see. I think that's everything. Anything else I need to announce, Dwayne? Or you're gonna come up and announce something? Oh dear, now I'm scared. All right, he's going to do that, and then I will give you a second reading. All right.
He always sign outside that door. If you need to either leave or just want to buy books, you can go out the other two doors. But I'd rather just row by row, so people got here first get to go first. So if you could let me sort of have a sort of semi-orderly progression in the sign part, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
And Dwayne, how late is U-Books itself open? Another 8 or 10 minutes. Okay, I was just curious. I have some Steelheart codes that I will have to hide somewhere, but I'm not going to be able to hide them in the bookstore because it's closing. So I'll find another way that you can get those. Hide one in your backpack? Okay. See, normally I hide them in the bookstore, but I was worried this time that the bookstore would be closed, and it is going to be closed. So I'll find a way to get those. All right, I'm going to read to you from Shadows of Self, which is the sequel to Alloy of Law. For those who haven't read Alloy of Law, it's an interesting book. I pitched to my editor the Mistborn books as a trilogy of trilogies. I wanted to do an epic fantasy trilogy in which I had this awesome epic fantasy story, and then I wanted to do an urban fantasy set in the same world 200 years later or 300 years later, in which all of the mythology and religion in the world had come from the events of the epic fantasy trilogy. I wanted to actually progress and have kind of a 1980s level technology urban fantasy thriller. And then I wanted to jump forward several hundred more years, and I wanted to do a space opera science fiction set in the same world with the same magic, where the magic would become the means by which space travel was possible. And so this whole trilogy of trilogies is something I'd never seen anyone do. Doesn't mean they haven't done it, it's just I hadn't seen it before. I like this idea of taking the epic fantasy trilogy and showing what happened later on in the progress. Well, as I was working and finishing the first Stormlight Archive book, I realized I didn't want to do the second Mistborn trilogy for quite a while because I didn't want to ask that much of my readers. Meaning, I didn't want to have multiple series going at the same time, which required a lot of continuity remembering, a lot of character remembering, and things like this. Like, I would rather be releasing books off of the Stormlight Archive that had plots that wrapped up more at the ending, so that when you picked up those sequels, you could pick up, like, for instance, the sequel to Steelheart and be like, oh, I can pick up on this pretty quickly. I don't have to go reread the first book. If that makes sense. Stormlight Archive is very involved, and doing two of those at once, I felt, was just not where I wanted to be. I wanted to have different styles of books, and so I thought I'd wait on the second Mistborn trilogy until I was done with the first 5 books of the Stormlight Archive, but I didn't want to leave Mistborn alone, and so I started writing something else in the middle, which was kind of a 1910-era detective novel, set in the same world as the epic fantasy, but years later, which was kind of a mashup of a sort of Sherlock Holmesian, more Edgar Allan Poe style detective story with a kind of some Western themes and things like this, mixed with all the magic and things from Mistborn. And it was so much fun that I have started a sequel, and I'm going to read to you from that now. It's the books, for those who haven't read it, are about a guy named Waxillium, who was, when he was young, left the city to go live out in the frontier because he was annoyed by all the politics. And years later, when the book starts, he is coming back because he has inherited his family seat and has become the head of the house and kind of now has responsibilities, and has to come leave the frontier and become a politician again, which he's not terribly well suited to doing. I figure I should write one of these things, the book read, to tell my side. Not the side that the historians will tell for me. I doubt they'd get it right. I don't know that I'd like them to, anyhow. Wax tapped the book with the end of his pencil, then scribbled down a note to himself on a separate page. I'm thinking of inviting the Boris brothers to the wedding, Steris said, from the couch opposite the one Wax sat upon. He grunted, still reading. I know Sayes doesn't approve of what I've done, the book continued. But what did he expect me to do, knowing what I know? The Boris brothers, Steris continued, they're acquaintances of yours, aren't they? I shot their father, Wax said, not looking up. Twice. I couldn't let it die, the book read. It's not right. Hemalurgy is good now, I figure. Are they likely to try to kill you? Steris asked. Boris Jr. swore to drink my blood, Wax said. Boris III, and yes, he's the brother of Boris Jr., don't ask. He swore to, what was it, eat my toes? He's not a clever man. We can use it, the book read. We should, shouldn't we? I'll just put them on the list then, Steris said. Wax sighed, looking up from the book. You're going to invite my mortal enemies to our wedding. We have to invite someone, Steris said. She sat with her blonde hair up in a bun, her stacks of papers for the wedding arrangements settled around her like subjects at court. Her blue flowered dress was fashionable without being the least bit daring, and her prim hat clung to her hair so tightly it might as well have been nailed in place. I'm certain there are better choices for invitations than people who want me dead. I hear family members are traditional. As a point of fact, Steris said, I believe your remaining family members actually do want you dead. She had him there. Well, yours don't, not that I've heard anyway. If you need to fill out the wedding party, invite more of them. I have invited all of my family as would be proper, Steris said, and all of my acquaintances that merit the regard. She reached to the side, taking out a sheet of paper. You, however, have given me only 2 names of people to invite, Wayne and a woman named Renette, whom you noted probably wouldn't try to shoot you at your own wedding. Very unlikely. She hasn't tried to kill me in years, not seriously at least. Steris sighed, setting the sheet down. Steris, Wax said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be flippant. Renette will be fine. We joke about her, but she's a good friend. She won't ruin the wedding, I promise. Then who will? Excuse me? I have known you for the better part of a year now, Lord Waxillium. I can accept you for who you are, but I am under no illusions. Something will happen at our wedding. A villain will burst in, guns firing, or we'll discover explosives at the altar, or perhaps the priest will try to assassinate you. It will happen. I'm merely trying to prepare for it. You're serious, aren't you? Wax asked, smiling. You're actually thinking of inviting one of my enemies so you can plan for a disruption. I've sorted them by threat level and ease of access, shuffling through her papers. Wait, Wax said, rising and walking over. He leaned down next to her, looking over her shoulder at the pages. Each sheet contained a detailed biography. Abe Manton, the Dasher Boys, Rust's Rick Stranger, I'd forgotten about him. Where did you get these? Your exploits are a matter of public record, Steris said. One that is of increasing interest to people. How long did you spend on this? Wax said, flipping through the pages in the stack. I wanted to be thorough. Besides, this sort of thing helps me think. And I wanted to know what you would spend your life doing. Well, that was actually kind of sweet, in a bizarre, Steris sort of way. Invite Douglas Venture, Wax said. He's kind of a friend, but he can't hold his liquor. You can count on him making a disturbance at the after party. Excellent, Steris said. And the other 37 seats in your section? Invite leaders among the seamstresses and dock workers of my house, Wax said. And the captains of the constable watches of various octans. It'll be a nice gesture. Very well. If you want me to help more with the wedding planning, No, this is the perfect sort of thing to occupy me, though someday I would like to know what is in that little book you peruse so often. The front door to the mansion burst open down below and booted feet thumped up the steps. A moment later, the door to the study slammed open and Wayne all but tumbled in. Darius, the house butler, stood apologetically just behind. Wiry and of medium height, Wayne had a round, clean-shaven face, and, as usual, wore his old Ruff's clothing, though Steris had pointedly sent him new clothing on at least 3 occasions. Wayne, Wax said, you could try the doorbell sometime. Nah, that warns the butler. Which is kind of the point. Baby little buggers, Wayne said, shutting the door on Darius. Can't trust them. Look, Wax, we have to go. The marksman has made his move. Finally, Wax thought. Let me grab my coat. Wayne nodded, glancing toward Steris. Hello, crazy, he said, nodding to her. Hello, idiot, she said, nodding back. Wax buckled on his gun belt over his fine city suit with vest and cravat, then threw on his duster. Let's go, he said, checking his ammo. Wayne pushed his way out the door, barreling down the stairs. Wax paused by Steris' couch. A man must have his hobbies, she said, raising another sheet of paper and inspecting it. I accept yours, Lord Waxillium, but do try to avoid being shot in the face, as we have wedding portraits to sit for this evening. I'll remember that. Keep an eye on my sister out there, Steris said. Well, this is a dangerous chase, Wax replied, hastening to the door. I doubt Morrissey will be involved. If you think that, then your powers of investigation are suspect. It's a dangerous chase. She'll find a way to be involved. Wax paused by the door, then glanced back at Steris. She looked up, meeting his eyes. It felt as if there should be something more to their parting, a send-off of some sort. Fondness? Steris seemed to sense it too, but neither said anything. Wax tipped his head back, taking a shot of whiskey and metal flakes, then charged through the doorway and threw himself over the balcony railing. He slowed himself with a push on the silver inlays of the marble floor of the entryway, hitting with the thump of boots on rock. Darius opened the front door for him as he leapt out to join Wayne at the coach for the ride too. Wax froze on the steps down to the street. What the hell is that? Motor car, Wayne said. We will stop right there.